Hi everyone, welcome to Best Recipes with Sharon. Once again, I'm going to ask you to step into my kitchen with me while we make a really good recipe. This one is for a festive Yule log. It can be made for Christmas or New Year's celebrations, and you'll love it. And this is completely homemade. We'll start with the chocolate sponge cake, and we'll do a special cream filling, and then we'll finish it off with a silky smooth chocolate ganache. But that's not all. I'll even show you how to make the decorations. So let's start by making the chocolate sponge cake. Melt a 1/4 cup of butter. Measure out 5 tablespoons of sour cream. And separate 4 large eggs. Separate the yolks from the whites, and you're going to be using both of these. It always helps to pre-pour most of your ingredients, and then it makes the putting it together much easier. Alright, so let's start with a large mixing bowl and add 3/4 cup of sugar and 1/4 cup of melted butter. Also add the 4 egg yolks. And now the 5 tablespoons of sour cream. And whisk that together until it's well combined. Now then we'll add our dry ingredients, so add 3/4 cup of all-purpose flour. Also add 1/3 cup of cocoa. And 1 teaspoon of baking powder. Next add 1 teaspoon of salt. Now once again, whisk it together until it's well incorporated. Then take your egg whites that you've separated, and they're in a separate bowl, so use a hand mixer and whip them until they form stiff peaks. So we'll take our stiffly beaten egg whites and start to fold them into the chocolate batter. And start with just a few spoonfuls at first. Remove the whisk attachment on your beater and just fold these in using your large spoon. Mix that in until it starts to be well incorporated. So add the rest of the egg whites and only mix it until it's well combined. And of course you're still using your large spoon to do this with, because you don't want to overmix it. And this is the consistency that you'll end up with. Now then we'll line a 16 by 12 inch cookie sheet with parchment paper, or get as close to that size as you can find, and leave the parchment paper hanging over the edges for about 2 inches on all sides. This is what you'll use to pull the cake out of its pan and also to roll it up with. Then take and spoon the chocolate batter onto the parchment paper. And it might seem like you don't have enough batter, but it will be spread fairly thin. And there will be enough batter if you use the right size pan. And when this bakes, it will puff up slightly, and you don't want it too thick through because otherwise it might crack on you. It has to be just the right amount of thickness, so it's important to have the right amount of batter for the size of the pan. So you will need between a 16 and 17 inch pan that's about 12 inches wide. Now you'll place that in a preheated oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit and set your timer for about 11 minutes. It should be on the middle rack as well. This will make a really good moist and rich cake part of your Yule log. And that's off to a really good start, right? And you can see here how it puffs up a little bit while it's baking, but that will settle itself back down a little bit as it cools off. And you know it's fully baked when you touch it lightly and it springs back, or use a fresh toothpick, and if it comes out clean, then you know that it's fully baked. Using the extra parchment paper that you have around the sides, you can just remove it from the pan like this, and you can see that it loosens from the edges quite easily, and you'll need to roll it up while it's still quite warm. So you can let it cool off just slightly so that you don't burn your hands, but it needs to be quite warm so that it will hold its shape and not crack on you. So you use the parchment paper to do it with, and just keep rolling evenly like this and work quickly. And roll it jelly roll fashion, lengthwise and inward to the other side. And leave it rolled up like this and let it cool down completely. It can't be warm when you go to put your filling in it, or the filling will just melt. So this part's very important. So while we're waiting for that to cool off, we'll make the cream filling. So now we'll start with 1 1/4 cups of whipping cream. And just use your whipping cream straight from the fridge because it should be cold. And place it in a medium-sized bowl. Then add about 3/4 cup of confectioner's sugar. And also add 1/8 teaspoon of salt. Then 1 teaspoon of vanilla. Using a hand mixer, whip it until it forms soft peaks. And this will take a few minutes. The next ingredient will help to hold your cream filling together, while still keeping it soft and creamy. So you'll add 8 ounces of mascarpone cheese. And add it straight to the whipped cream mixture while it's still chilled. It'll mix in nicely and hold things together, and doesn't change the flavor of the filling a lot because the cheese is very mellow. It just helps to make it more creamy and delicious. I think it's much better than just simply using whipped cream because it won't melt as easily on you either. You can add the whole amount in all at once, and then just take the hand mixer and mix it in just until it's well combined. And it will stiffen up quite quickly, so you don't need to do this for very long. So you're ready? It's time to check out the cake and see how it's doing and if it held its shape. So gently unroll it, leaving the first part curled up a little bit. You don't want to flatten it out entirely. Yay, it hasn't cracked. It's looking pretty good. The texture is just perfect on this cake. So we're ready to add our cream filling. You simply just spoon it onto the cake until you've got all the filling on there, and don't try to tuck it up underneath too far, just spread it out evenly. And get ready to roll it up again. And simply roll it the same way as you did before, only this time without the parchment paper, of course. And your cake will have a certain amount of memory from it cooling off in that shape, so just go with it. This is so exciting. It's working beautifully. It hasn't cracked on us, and it looks like the filling's well incorporated, and oh my goodness, we're going to have to chill this now until it's completely chilled and let it set so that the filling is nice and firm. So I cover it with some plastic wrap and set it aside in a cool place to set. And you should let it set for an hour or 2. Now let me show you how to make some decorations with some cranberries and some rosemary leaves. And you can make these while you're waiting for your cake to set. And it's simple and easy to do, so just add equal parts water and sugar to a medium saucepan. I'm adding about 1/2 cup of each here. And give it a little bit of a stir. Then put this on over high heat and get it starting to boil. Once it starts to boil, turn the heat down and let it simmer for about 5 minutes. Then remove it from the heat, and I place it into a little bowl so that's easier for dipping. And let the syrup cool down just slightly, maybe up to 8 minutes. Now the next thing to do is add a little bit of sugar to a pie plate. And I'm starting off with about 1/2 cup here. You can always add more as you need it because the sugar will clump up a little bit when you get it wet. Need to freshen it up with more sugar as you go along. Alright, so let's make these. I used some frozen cranberries and I used fresh rosemary. Yes, I did find fresh rosemary because we want that real evergreen look. So just use small tongs and start your dipping. I'm going to do the cranberries first. First into the syrup and then into the sugar. And then set it aside to set. It's as simple as that. And you can do as many of these as you wish, depending on how much decorating you have to do. Now to do the rosemary leaves. Dip them in the syrup first, do it fairly quickly, and shake off the excess, and then put it into the sugar and shake it around in the sugar and do that fairly quickly and set it aside to set. So that just makes it look like snow. And you can use the leftover clumped sugar to decorate with if you wanted to as well. But I chose not to use that on top of the log because I wanted to keep the smooth texture. So let's get on to making the chocolate ganache. This is rich, creamy, and smooth. Start by placing 1 cup of semi-sweet chocolate chips in a medium mixing bowl. Then measure out 1 cup of heavy whipping cream. Place that in a separate bowl. And pop that in the microwave and heat it until it just starts to come to a boil. Then you remove it and pour it over the chocolate chips and let them sit for a few minutes. The hot cream will naturally melt the chocolate chips for you. Back to the Yule log. Give it a little bit of a diagonal slice on the end. And then we'll use that as a little bit of a branch at the side. Then straighten out the end of the log and eat that part, of course. So next you'll take out the Yule log and place it on a platter or a cutting board or whatever you want to serve it on, so that you get ready to put the ganache on it. And you can place your little limb piece on the side if you want. And now that it's ready, you can place it back in a cool spot until the ganache is ready. Take a hand mixer and whip the ganache until it becomes nice and thick. It will take a long time. Probably about 15 to 20 minutes even. It needs to cool off completely and thicken up, but once it does, it happens quickly. You can set it in the fridge to chill off a little bit faster, but only for like 5 minutes at a time, and take it back out and whip it again, because you don't want it to set too quickly and be clumpy. So be patient and whip it as much as you can during the cooling down process, because it will be as smooth and creamy as this, and it will thicken up very quickly once it does. So the next part is pretty much self-explanatory, so just watch how this is done. Spread it evenly using a large knife or a spatula or whatever you have on hand that works for you. And to make your log look like it has bark on it, just use the back end of a fork, and the rougher you go with it and the more uneven, the more realistic it looks. Now that we have it looking like bark, we can finish it off with the rosemary and the cranberries. So not only does this add a beautiful festive touch to your holiday gathering, it is a really decadent and tasty dessert. So go ahead, give it a try, and let me know how it turned out. So happy holidays, everyone, and have a safe and happy new year. And thanks to everyone for their support throughout the year of 2022. Merry Christmas, and now go enjoy your time with your family and friends.